Welcome to BET 2019. We have a clicker, thank you very much. Welcome to BET 2019. Actually the most amazing, brilliant showcase of education, technology and innovation at its very best. Actually not just its best, but its biggest. So here we are at the 35th BET show, bigger than ever. It just keeps on growing. And speaking of keeps on growing, let's go back. Speaking of keeps on growing, we're really proud that this show happens here in London because we are very proud in the UK of our EdTech sector, the fourth largest in the world with a projected export value of around £170 million. That's over $200 million, and I want that to keep on growing as well. But of course, here at BET, you see products and innovations and services from right across the world, as well as from here in Britain. You might say it is a sort of an Aladdin's cave for the education geek. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have a confession to make to you. I am that geek. Or at least I used to be. Now, I wonder if any of you are old enough to remember this from your youth. I certainly am. This was one of my hobbies when I was a child growing up, coding, or as we used to call it, programming. Sitting in your bedroom trying to get a game out of something as simple and straightforward as a Commodore VIC-20. And for any of you who are not old enough to remember what these types of technologies were, a Commodore VIC-20 was something you used to plug into your telly and you'd plug in a tape deck to load up programs. It was something about the size of a small coffee table with about the same amount of memory. And I compare that now to something like Fortnite, which my children tell me does not actually take 14 days to play, but does seem to take something like 14 gigabytes to download. It was hard writing a playable game with 3,583 bytes of RAM. Hard, but not impossible. In fact, in some ways, when technology was simpler, life was simpler. And when I took my first job at the age of 17, or at least the first job that I had to wear a suit for every day, it was at IBM in Manchester. And it was possible back in those days, in 1987, as a 17-year-old, to be taught in half a day how to take apart a PC and put it back together. And actually, if I reflect back to those times in the late 1980s, I'm struck that actually we had most of, or all actually, of the core ingredients of office productivity that we have today. We had spreadsheeting, we had word processing, we had slide design, we had database, and we had desktop publishing. There is the classic Lotus 1-2-3. Who's old enough to remember that? But I'm struck by the difference between having groundbreaking innovation and then having the sorts of great leaps forward that make those innovations work at their full potential, at their full scale in the mass market. And of course, today we still have spreadsheeting and word processing and database technology and so on. But it was the graphical user interface and point-and-click technology which made it available to that mass market in an accessible way. Back in 1987, I was a bit weird because I worked at IBM. I had an email address. But if I said that to any of my friends, they had no idea what I was talking about because it took a number of years and a period and 3 more letters at the end of every email address to make it actually work for the consumer. It took the internet, the biggest leap forward of them all. And speaking of leap forwards, let's leap forward to where we are today. And we have some astounding examples of education technology available. You'll see many of them in the halls out there. And actually, you can see many of them in use, in very active and productive use in our schools in this country today. Such as at Bolton College, where their chatbot called Ada, named of course after the great Ada Lovelace, is enabling personalized learning for 14,000 students, but also been able to deal with so many routine and quite a lot of not so routine questions to relieve the burden of administration on staff. Or High Furlong School in Blackpool, where they're using technology in very innovative ways to support their students with special educational needs and disabilities to get the very most out of their education. Or Sandringham High School, where they're using technology to create a generation of discerning consumers of information, being critical users of technology and searching out bias online. So there are many encouraging and very positive things happening in education technology. But EdTech also faces some particular challenges, I think, unique to the education sector. One of them is that EdTech sometimes gets a bit of a bad name because this is one of the few sectors where technology has been associated for some people not with a decrease in their work, but an increase. And one example of that is email. Now, email is great when it replaces other types of communication to make things more productive. But in education, what you often hear from teachers is that it hasn't replaced anything, it's just added to it. And to deal with this, we need schools and leaders to think in innovative ways, and then we also need the EdTech companies also to come up with more solutions. Now, of course, one of the very best things about technology, and one way in which it has changed remarkably since the 1980s, is its ability to crunch large amounts of data and often, though sadly not always, turn that into informative analysis and charts and outputs. But of course, the data has to come from somewhere. And this is another way in which EdTech, technology, and IT can get a bit of a bad name in the world of education. Because the sheer volume of data that is required or is asked for to be inputted into these systems can create an additional burden on teachers. Then there's the market itself, and there's probably no better example of an efficient market working well than here in the Excel Centre in January 2019, bringing together buyers, sellers, the interested, the curious, to come together to taste and see what is on offer. But away from bets, there can be some difficulties with how the market works for EdTech products. If you are a teacher, you're a school leader, or a head, actually it can be very difficult to know from this vast range of what is on the market really what is good. From the point of view of a seller, particularly if you have a devolved system as we do in this country, and we are very proud of our devolved system in education and think it is a great strength, but that can also make it hard for a seller to reach the buyer and to be able cost effectively to do their marketing and their product exposition. There can be a very understandable nervousness on behalf of schools dealing sometimes with brands and names that they are not familiar with and wondering if they can be certain that these will be around in a number of years' time. And then there's the issue about making a commitment. Once you've signed up for a particular piece of software, a particular program, it can feel like you're locked in. And that can both make people stick with things perhaps longer than they would have done otherwise, but also make them more reluctant to take them on in the first place. And that can mean some wastage, which is a serious issue. A serious issue because EdTech is now big business. Here in England, EdTech, or technology in general in schools, now has a spend of some £450 million a year. So we need to make sure that money is being spent effectively. So from this spring, we are going to be shaping our EdTech strategy for England. And it has a number of different elements to it. One of them is our friends at BISA are running a number of roadshows around the country which have already started bringing the tech to teachers, to enable more schools to see what is on offer, to see what is possible. They are free, they're happening right throughout the country, and I'd encourage you, if you haven't already, to sign up to attend one. We also want schools to be able to see good tech in action, and that's why we're going to be rolling out a network of demonstrator schools and colleges where educators can get the sort of peer-to-peer support and the training that they tell us is important to them, and raise their confidence level and skill in using some of these key products. We need to have a trusted single place, an education destination, if you like, where people know where to go for education products and services. And by the way, this isn't just for teachers, but also thinking about parents and direct consumers of education services as well. And finally, because of those challenges that I mentioned with the way that markets work, we need to have an informed marketplace where people can buy with confidence, and that also makes it more effective, more efficient for sellers to market their wares. And an important part of that is this product, which is being trialed by BESA, launches today. It's called LendEd. So it's an opportunity with tech products to try before you buy. It also allows teachers to write reviews, and you can see case studies and get hints and tips and advice on how to get the most out of these products. And if you do then go on to buy the product, you have the reassurance of knowing that the companies involved have been vetted. So I want to make sure that in our education system we are able to make the fullest use of the complete range of opportunities available through EdTech. But I also want to make sure that we are able to be specific in what problems we are trying to solve. Now, we have set aside a £10 million innovation fund in order to help to drive this forward. And part of that is going to be about addressing some very specific challenges. These are real-world issues that exist today that we can look for new solutions to. And they cover everything from administration, assessment, learning at all stages, teaching practice itself, and then the professional development of teachers. Now, I could have a lot more than 10 things up here. I mean, just if you look at special educational needs, could be expanded into a number of different items. And in different countries, there may be a different list. So, for example, there'll be places where accessing remote or particularly sparse rural communities is a very important thing to develop. But I thought 10 was quite a lot already, and we wanted to have focus. So these are the 10 we are going to be focusing on. And each one of those, they're just a pithy little phrase, but each one of them has a very specific challenge attached to it, and in most cases, a measurable, definable metric as well. For now, let me just talk about 3 of them. First of all, on lesson prep. I want to see what technology companies can come forward with to help to cut the time that teachers spend on preparing and marking homework and in-class assessments. Obviously, this is absolutely vital work. It is at the core of what we do in school. It's at the core of what teachers are about, but it takes too long. And so I want to see what we can do through technology to cut the time doing that by 2 hours a week or more. Secondly, the engagement of parents. And obviously, parents are crucial to children's education. Again, I think there is an opportunity here to cut the amount of time that this takes while enhancing the quality of interaction with parents. And as an example, we already have some schools in the northeast of this country where they've introduced an online learning journal, which enriches the amount of information available to parents and their involvement in their child's education and the progress they're making, but without adding pressure or more pressure onto teachers. And finally, for now, beat the cheats. So we know that the growth of essay mills, sort of the subcontracting of work, if you like, and the older problem of plagiarism. These things, of course, undermine the great work that students do at university, and also over time actually undermines or erodes the validity, the value of qualifications themselves. And software exists and is widely used to try and identify plagiarism and abuse, but it seems also that the problem persists and in some ways, in some cases, seems to be getting worse. So for us to keep up with this, we need to make sure that we are not just up with the cheats, but one step ahead of the cheats and get smarter in the way we do it. And for all of these 3 and the other 7 on the list, there are 3 further tests which I think need to be woven through them. The first is that things have to be cost effective. Ideally, actually, to reduce the cost that schools are expending on these things to free up more resource for teaching and learning and all the other important things that schools do. I also want it not only to involve a manageable amount of teacher workload, but to cut the amount of teacher workload that is being expended. And finally, and most importantly of all, of course, it's all about outcomes. It's all about enhancing learning so that more children can do better learning and fulfill their full potential. Now, I think you're all showing remarkable self-restraint, by the way, by sitting here listening to people doing PowerPoint presentations. I apologize for that. But there are some fantastic presentations coming up after mine, which I hope you will enjoy. And I know then you're going to want to get out into the Aladdin's cave out there to see the full breadth of all that is on offer. I do believe we are truly on the cusp of amazing things in education technology. And there are some truly amazing products and services out there. And I say amazing in the truest sense, that when you see them, you are actually taken aback by what is possible. But in some ways, I still feel we're still in 1987, that we have a lot of these brilliant innovations, but we need to make more connections. We need to create conveyors to bring these things to their fullest potential throughout our system. And the opportunity you have today to be with colleagues and innovators in this system from around the world is an unrivaled opportunity to do that. We must never think about technology for its own sake. Technology is an enabler and an enhancer. And ladies and gentlemen, you in this room are a big part of that, because we need a partnership approach between educators and innovators, between the technology companies, and government has a role as well, to make sure that we work together to forge those brilliant tools for a brighter future for all our children. Thank you.